like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders?
Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef elei. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot
We raised the question, now we answer that question as we stand in the presence of the one whom we now describe as truly there is none, O Lord, among the gods. Pages 88 and 89 is that response.
Kamocha Elohim Adonai, Ve'en kamasecha, Malchut kamachut kol olamim, Memshalka b'chol dor v'dor, B'chol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch, Adonai oz, le'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech, amo v'asham. Together, there is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds. Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord, you, my Lord, shall reign throughout my life. That now becomes our response. That response is shaped in the words of the Shema, pages 34 to 39. So utilize those words to make exactly that response, or to reaffirm the response that you've made before. Pages.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Ve'ata et Adonai Elohecha, V'chol hachal u'chol nashekah u'chol emerecha, Ve'hayu ha'dvarim ha'eleh, Asher Elohim etzavta hayom ha'levanecha, V'shinatam levanecha, V'dibartam, V'shirtecha b'beitecha, Uv'lechtecha b'derech, Uv'shachtacha uv'numecha, Uv'shartam leot ha'yedecha, Ve'hayu letadafot beinecha, Uv'tatam al mezuzot beitecha, Uv'yisharecha. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates.
On pages 88 and 89, it gives us a vision of the future when the reality that we've affirmed will be the reality that all around the world, in fact, affirm. It is also a reality we experience now as the Torah goes forth among us, but it's also a reminder of the reality our ancestors experienced as they walk hand in hand with the same God, as these verses are taken directly from that walk through the wilderness with their God. Pages 88 and 89.
ויהי בצהרון ויאמר משה ומה אדוני ויפוצו יבכה וינוסו משנאך מפניך כי מציון תצא תורה כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר אדוני מירושלים ברוך שנתן תורה תורה ברוך שנתן תורה תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו.
And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel.
As he in his holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel, so we as his people now receive that Torah among us, as we now respond on page 133, expressing our gratitude and our commitment.
The ark now unveils its treasure.
To our eyes and minds and hearts.
Inside, the scroll of Torah stands.
It stands there with all its richness and wisdom.
As we listen, voices speak, voices of our ancestors.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, and Moses.
O God, they bring us your instructions for us.
Sarah,
Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and Miriam speak to us as well.
O God, they move us to respond to your promises to us.
We are grateful for your words, the words of Torah.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord calls.
We will hear your words that we may learn them, love them, live them.
What does the Lord require of you? To fear him, love him, serve him, and walk in all his ways.
all the Lord has said, he will do.
Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Matthew, may he bless Karen, may he bless Rabbi John, may he bless Virginia, who have all come up to honor God in the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavora.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorav Leolam Vaed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. Bless the Lord who is blessed.
Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us his Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
והיה עקב תשמעון את המשפטים האלה ושמרתם ועשיתם אותם ושמר אדוני אלוהיך לך את הברית ואת החסד אשר נשבע לאבותיך. You may be seated. And this will be the reward whenever you pay careful attention to these prescriptions, and in fact you perform them. And in fact, if you safeguard them and perform them, so the Lord your God will safeguard for you, for your benefit, the covenant and the chesed, or in this case, the covenant, often translated love, the covenant of love, which he swore to your ancestors. Interesting text. I'm not going to say a whole lot about it now because I'll say a whole lot more about it, probably too much more about it a little later. But notice that all of this is for our benefit. Lecha, that classic little Greek phrase, or classic little Hebrew phrase or word that reminds us that when God gives us these kind of instructions, he intends them to be for our benefit, for our good. And it becomes good for us if we follow through on them. Some interesting terms in here, but again, we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And as one of our Hebrew students reminded me, thank you, I'm not going to tell you which one, so no person gets the blame. You now take out your bulletin, and now you get to read this text from the Hebrew. Students, are you ready? Okay, let's do it together. V'haya Eikev tishma'un et המשפטים האלה ושמרתם ועשיתם אותם ושמר אדוני אלוהיך לך את הברית ואת החסד אשר נשבע לאבותיך. Very well done. And now we have not only heard the words of God, we have in fact repeated the words of God for ourselves.
Deuteronomy 7, 9, 11, 14. From this you can know that Adonai your God is indeed God, the faithful God, who keeps his covenant and extends grace to those who love him and observe his mitzvot to 1,000 generations. Therefore, you are to keep the mitzvot, laws, and rulings which I am giving you today and obey them, because you are listening to these rulings, keeping and obeying them. Adonai, your God, will keep with you the covenant and mercy that he swore to your ancestors. He will love you, bless you, and increase your numbers. He will also bless the fruit of your body and the fruit of your ground, your grain, wine, olive oil, and the young of your cattle and sheep, in the land he swore to your ancestors that he would give you. You will be blessed more than all other peoples. There will not be a sterile male or female among you, and the same with your livestock.
I'll be reading from Deuteronomy chapter 8, verses 6 through 11, and verses 15 through 16. So obey the mitzvot of Adonai your God, living as he directs and fearing him. For Adonai your God is bringing you into a land of streams, springs, and water, welling up from the depths in valleys and on hillsides. It is a land of wheat and barley, grapevines, fig trees, and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat food in abundance and lack nothing in it, a land where the stones contain iron and the hills can be mined for copper. So you will eat and be satisfied, and you will bless Adonai your God for the good land he has given you. Be careful not to forget Adonai your God by not obeying his mitzvot, rulings, and regulations that I am giving you today, who led you through the vast and fearsome desert with its poisonous snakes, scorpions, and waterless, thirsty ground, who brought water out of flint rock for you, who fed you in the desert with manna unknown to your ancestors.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayo olam netabatochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave to us the Torah of truth and life everlasting, planted in our midst. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah.
He's truly one who's given to us the Torah. As we receive those words thousands of years ago, so we receive them again this evening. As we stand as our ancestors did and acknowledge that these are the words of God directly for our lives. I want you to notice something as I elevate the Torah, the process that's called Hagbah. You will see in the bottom corner of what is my right, and which will very quickly become your right, you'll see the words of the Shema. You can tell that it's got enlarged Hebrew letters in the first line. Directly across from that line, is the reading for tonight. And that in itself has implications. I'll tell you that story later. The Zohar Torah is our response, pages 98 and 99. Transliteration if needed, page 95.
Ezot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Lifnei Bnei Yisrael Al Pi Adonai Beyad Moshe. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated. Words that come from God are intended to impact our lives. We acknowledge that and anticipate that He will, in fact, impact our lives. That acknowledgement is Etz Chaim. Pages 96 and 97. Renew our days as of old is what we request.
Etz Chaim hi lemachazim la v'torgeha me'ushar v'racheha darkei noam v'chol nativotei
aleha shalom. Hashivenu Adonai alecha benashuva. Kadesh Amenu Edem. Hashivenu Adonai alecha benashuva. Kadesh Amenu Edem.
A tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
We now have the opportunity to reflect on the fact that we get to stand in his presence as his priests. And in order to do so, yes, we do stand. In order to do so, we need to be properly prepared. And the renewing of our days is part of that preparation as we now stand before him and respond. On pages 98 and 99, Ufnachol Yomar.
Uvnochol Yomar, Shuva, Adonai Revavot al Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
And now as we greet one another up front and, in a sense, encourage one another that we've been allowed this special privilege of working with the Torah, do encourage one another with the very special privilege of being or being in the presence of the God of the universe, as well as being in your presence as well.
That's not a bad thing. Years go by. Radiant is everything. Oh, Donnie. Hey, you're in here.
Okay, enough of the chattering. It's time for me to do the chattering. Last week, our Parsha reading, toward the end of it, as you noticed when I held up the scroll, included the Shema. It hit home. It stirred and moved us, or at least it should have. And now, we wait with anticipation for what's next. What more does God have to say to us, Lecha, for our benefit? And so this week's Parsha begins, as you heard it read, V'haya Eikev Tishma. But just what does that mean? What does it intend for us? Lecha. Unfortunately, and far too often, this text is completely misunderstood. Here's the commentary I read recently by one rabbi. And I quote, "My third grade art teacher was a terror." Riverside. I had a similar art teacher, but it was in 7th grade. And I swear to you, if students got out of line, he'd pick up the wooden gavel that's on his desk and fling it at the very quickly his students remained completely under control. Back to this story. That was my story. So anyhow, my third grade art teacher was a terror. Her rules were ironclad, and disobedience was severely punished. Quick to lose her temper, she once grabbed a paintbrush from me, and critiquing the stars I had sketched in my rendition of the night sky, she painted directly over them. Another day, as the class was gathered around watching her at the demonstration table, I realized that I needed to go to the bathroom. But I knew the rules. No leaving the room without permission, no interrupting the demonstration, and no raising your hand unless the teacher asked a question. Parshat Eikev, for me, is similarly brutal. The crush of God, the if-then God of wrath and punishment, is overbearing. The choice that God offers in our Parsha is not really a choice. Rabbi quotes the Parsha. And if you do obey these rules and observe them carefully, the Lord your God will maintain faithfully for you the covenant that he made on oath with your fathers. He will favor you and bless you. Deuteronomy 7, 12, and 13. On the other hand, quoting a later part of the Parsha, if you do forget the Lord your God and follow other gods to serve them or bow down to them, I warn you this day that you shall certainly perish. Deuteronomy 8:19. The God of Eikev expects us to respond to an if-then choice, which is not then really a choice at all, but rather a display of raw power. Quoting another portion, bear in mind that the Lord your God disciplines you just as a man disciplines his son. Therefore keep the commandments of the Lord your God. Walk in his ways and revere him. Deuteronomy 8:5. Reading Eikev, I can't help but feel the same way I did in that third grade art class, constrained by the narrowness of the rules and left wondering what room there is for me to ask questions, to take care of my own needs, or to paint stars of a different sort. End quote. And I'm going to suggest to you that this is precisely how not only this rabbi, but especially many Christian commentators and most Christians, as well as many Jews, tend to view this text. God is seen by many as the cosmic enforcer, that mean old school principal, or art teacher as it was in this case. And Eddie's story illustrates the same point quite well. Young Eddie was doing very badly in math. His Jewish parents had tried everything. Tutors, mentors, flashcards, special learning centers, everything they could think of to help him in his math. Finally, in a last-ditch effort, they took Eddie and enrolled him in the local Catholic school. After the first day, little Eddie came home with a very serious look on his face. He didn't even kiss his mother hello. Instead, he went straight to his room and he started studying. Books and papers were spread all over the room, and little Eddie was hard at work. His mother was amazed. Later, she called him down to dinner. To her shock, the minute he was done, he marched back to his room without a word, and he was back studying as hard as before. Now, this went on day after day, while his mother tried to understand what had made the difference. Finally, Eddie brought home his report card. He quietly laid it on the table, went up to his room, and hit the books yet again. His mother looked at the card, and to her great surprise, little Eddie got an A in math. Now, she could no longer contain her curiosity, so she marched up to his room and said, son, what made the difference? What was it? Was it the nuns? Little Eddie looked at her and simply shook his head, no. Well, then, she replied, what helped with your math? Was it the books? Was it the discipline? The structure? The uniforms? What was it? Her glum-looking Jewish son just looked at her and said, well, on the very first day of class, when I saw that poor guy nailed to the plus sign, I knew they weren't fooling around. Thank you, Eddie, for sharing your story. Anyhow, in a few minutes, we'll look at our Parsha from a completely different perspective. And in doing so, we'll discover that the common viewpoint on this text is not what the author intended. This is not our God. But first, in fairness to the rabbi goes on to share an important insight, which I will now share with you. Quote, there are times when we need a commanding God, when we need the structure of a God who enforces rules to get us through a particularly wild stretch of life. There are other times when we feel rebellious, when we know what God expects of us, but also have a need to not do that, to stretch the limits of our relationship to God. There are times when we assert our will, and there are times to surrender in deep humility to that which is so much larger and more awesome than we are. And many situations demand that we hold on to both at the same time. This is why the Shema, the backbone of our liturgy, which we are encouraged to recite daily, contains both a passage from Parshat Eikev, what we read tonight, in its purest reward and punishment, choice that isn't really a choice form, and the V'ahavta passage, which we did recite from Deuteronomy 6, commanding us to love God fully. We need both. Onkelos, the first century translator of Torah into Aramaic, chose an unusual word for Eikev, which is translated as if. For example, and if you obey these rules. Onkelos instead translated as chalaf, meaning in exchange for, opening up the distinct possibility that if then is not all there is to these passages. Nachmanides, the Rambam. Nachmanides, in his commentary on Deuteronomy 7:12, takes Onkelos' translation as the grounds for a new interpretation. Onkelos thus made it an expression of roundabout. In other words, the end result of a series of events, derived from the verse, and Hey Akov, which sounds an awful lot like Eikev, if you're listening to it. Hey Akov. Winding shall be made straight. Isaiah 40, verse 4. By the way, that's last week's Haftarah. That is, the winding road that goes roundabout will become a straight, level path. Life is a journey, end quote. And let me add, and God knows full well that our roads will have numerous bends and curves and turns in them. And remember also that Deuteronomy 8:5 is part of our context for our parsha, and intentionally so. Remember? Bear in mind, perhaps better way to translate it, know in your heart that the Lord your God disciplines you as a father does his child. By the way, another rabbi said something very similar in Hebrews chapter 12. And no, it was not the Apostle Paul, in case you're wondering. In case you're wondering too much about that, sign up for a course at the yeshiva and we'll straighten you out on that one. Now, as frequently translated, and as reflected in this commentary, Deuteronomy 7, verses 12 and 13 reads, if you pay attention to these laws and are careful to follow them, then the Lord your God will keep his covenant of love with you, as he swore to your ancestors. He will love and bless you. Although, I'm going to suggest, often translated if, this term is far richer than its usual translations. Moreover, it's not even a normal word for if. That term is im. And you didn't hear that anywhere in the text. It's Eikev. Because in fact, there is no im anywhere in our text. Actually, Eikev is much better translated because, as in fact the Ramban suggested. Just to give you some historical perspective, the Ramban, 1200s. Anyhow, as he suggested, it's better translated because or when. The idea here appears then to be an encouragement, namely that the people, that we, will in fact follow God's instructions and therefore will reap the benefits that God has committed himself to lavishing on us. Moreover, according to several rabbinic commentators, some earlier now than the Ramban, going back to around the 900s, Saadia Gaon, Ibn Ezra, and so forth, according to a number of rabbinic commentators, there's also a suggestion or a connotation of reward inherent in the wording that we find here. So the thought in our text more fully would read like this. Here is the reward when, or better perhaps even, whenever you pay attention to these prescriptions. And then later in chapter 28 and again in chapter 30, the same idea is reinforced. When Moses lists the many blessings God will rain down on the people whenever they follow him. And in tonight's parsha, tonight's reading, tonight's portion, the rewards are great as well. Remember the text says he will love you and bless you. Now interestingly, these verses sound almost identical, at least they should sound almost identical, to Yeshua's statements in John chapter 14, verse 21, where Yeshua says, whoever has my commands and obeys them, that person is the one who loves me. And the one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love such a person and show myself to this person. Now this is the ultimate in blessing. The personal manifestation in relationship to us of both the one whom we describe as a Vinu Malkeinu and the one whom we acknowledge as our Messiah. In fact, there's a very strong likelihood, I'm going to suggest, that Yeshua is actually referring to Eikev at this point in the gospel written by Yochanan HaShliach. Quick aside, those of you who bothered to take the course last year at this time in Gospels, and if you didn't, shame on you, you will realize that Yochanan, as he writes his gospel, shapes his gospel as an exposition of a number of the texts as they were read in the synagogues weekly, particularly as they related to the holidays. If I didn't have that commercial, no, actually that wasn't. I was laying a guilt trip on you for not taking the course last year. So take the course this year. End of commercial, back to an end of guilt trip, maybe. Interestingly, there is a further dimension to this term. It also means heal. And on the significance of this meaning, the Archkol Chumash perceptively notes, Archkol is perhaps popular at this point in time of the traditional Chumashim or Chumashot, whichever one it is. I quote, Midrashically, the word Eikev alludes to the sort of commandments that people might regard as relatively unimportant. So they tend figuratively to tread on them with their heels, hence the term Eikev. Thus the Torah assures Israel that if they are careful to observe even these neglected or least commandments, they can be certain that God will reward them. The ones you would tend to tread on with your heels. Now this too sounds just like Yeshua, as he reminded us in Levi's Gospel, Matthew 5:19, and I quote, anyone who breaks the least or neglected of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices these commandments will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Now that's quite the reward. Be called great in God's kingdom. Clearly, God wants us to be very careful to follow him fully. Interestingly, let me say it this way. Additionally, there's an interesting connection of our parsha, Jacob, Eikev, Ayin Kof Vav for you Hebrew students. By the way, it's spelled the same way for those of you who are not Hebrew students. Eikev is also part of Jacob's name. So his name more accurately means, may he, talking about God, be at your heels, as in your defending rear guard. We talk more about that when we talk about the Jacob story, but not for here. His name and its meaning are alluded to in a strategic text found in the Haftarah in 2 weeks. Isaiah chapter 52, verse 12, which reads, For the Lord God will go before you. The God of Israel will be your rear guard. In other words, your Jacob. Interesting. The God of Israel will be your Jacob. Now, this verse immediately precedes the introduction to the classic text of Isaiah 53. You didn't need me to tell you that, because you're fully aware, because you, like Eddie, excel in math. The chapter 53 comes after chapter 52. Anyhow, so it leads into Isaiah 53, that classic text, which unveils the ultimate way in which God went before Jacob and his descendants and protected them and us. This is the core of the blessings God showered on Jacob the man and Jacob the people, and through them on the entire world, as Genesis 12:3 reminds us, as in fact we reflected on previously. And by that I don't mean tonight, but other ways. And if the Jacob story is properly understood, then Jacob, who's called the Ish, Genesis 25, which means the complete person. If that story is properly understood, then Jacob serves as the pattern for the kind of God-expected lifestyle which is described, in fact, in our parsha. Hebrews 11:21. Jacob is described as faithful to God, faithfully following Him. And that's the pattern for us as well. But guess what? There's even more in our text. I told you I'd be talking too much on this long this text. It goes on to say, God will safeguard, better translation than keep, will safeguard His covenant of love with you. The Hebrew word translated keep is the word shamar, which is used to describe the watchmen or guards on the ancient city walls, or later in history refers to the sentries who protected Israel's early kibbutzim. Now they were responsible to be alert and to keep the cities or kibbutzim's inhabitants safe. And that is precisely how God will watch over and safeguard the covenant He made with our ancestors and thereby with us as well. He'll do so alertly and faithfully, securely and lovingly. In fact, in our parsha, the covenant itself, remember Habrit Chesed? The covenant itself is characterized and described as a covenant of love. And that's set up for us in the closing couple of verses of the text that precedes our parsha for this week. Isaiah 7, 8, and 9. Now you might ask, so what does Isaiah 7 and 8 and 9 say? Well, I'm glad you asked. So here's what it says. But it was because the Lord loved you and kept the oath He swore to your ancestors that He brought you out with a mighty hand and redeemed you. Know therefore that the Lord your God is God. He is the faithful God, keeping His covenant of love to 1,000 generations of those who love Him and follow His guidelines. In other words, this is a covenant that comes, it's a covenant of love that comes from the God of love. It's a covenant of deep and abiding love, as the Hebrew chesed. Almost impossible to translate. The impact is something like profound, faithful love, as the Hebrew term chesed indicates. And by the way, our responsibility is similar to God's commitment, since the same word, shamar, remember that one, is used for our relationship and our response to the covenant, often translated careful to follow. No. We safeguard it as we follow. In other words, we must alertly and lovingly treasure God's guidelines. And we've been set up for that in our services we do each week. As our response to the priest in the Torah puts it, the ark unveils its treasure before our eyes and our hearts. The Torah stands there in all its richness. Please take note of this. The covenant found in our passage, described in our passage, is the very same one that God made with our ancestors at Mount Sinai. And it is called what? A covenant of love, not law. Don't make the mistake too many people make. Because, boy, then they turn this whole thing upside down. And although in some cases it's very interesting to live in an upside-down world, if you get that, cool. If you don't, talk to someone who's cooler than you are. They'll fill you in. Anyhow, where was I? Upside down. You see, chesed is a very strong word used to describe God's unlimited graciousness, His overflowing compassion, and His unconditional commitment to us. And as such, it's at the very heart of Exodus 34, 6 and 7, where God, the giver of His covenant, from that same mountain describes Himself to Moses. Remember? I'm the Lord your God, the one who overflows in this profound love. who is so compassionate that there is no way to circumscribe it, is literally how that Hebrew unfolds there. This beautiful text which beautifully unwraps Chesed's broader meaning. If we truly realize then God's covenant with us at Sinai is a covenant of love, then we should be even more anxious and eager to carefully safeguard and gratefully, enthusiastically, wholeheartedly follow it. Now this principle is further reinforced toward the end of our parsha. You'll remember the words, Deuteronomy 10, verses 12 and 13. And now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? We recited in this translation, except to listen carefully to all he says to you, and to obey for your own good. There's that lech lecha again. To obey for your own good his prescriptions, and to serve him, and love him, and to worship him with all your hearts and souls. It continues a few verses later. He is your praise, and he is your God, the one who, for you, lecha, has done mighty miracles you yourselves have seen. So, as a result, you must love the Lord your God and follow all his guidelines. Therefore, ours is to be a loving response to his loving commitment to us. One further thought. In the scroll, the Sefer Torah itself, this passage, as I showed you, is directly adjacent to the text of the Shema. It even begins with these words, Tishma'un, pay close attention. Tishma'un, which contains the very same letters as the Shema, directly across from the Shema. The implication is quite clear. If I'm really sincere about the Lord being my God, the only one whom I will serve, if I'm serious about loving him with my whole heart, strength, and life, I will then more carefully and gratefully follow all his instructions in the Torah. And remember, lecha, it's for our good and our benefit. So we need to be far more careful than to treasure and follow God's guidelines in the Torah because we love him. And the reward will be great. Reflecting yet again on Yeshua's words in Yochanan's Gospel, this time 14:23. If you love me and follow my guidelines, my Father and I love you, and we will come to you and make our home with or within you. An amazing reward that's waiting for us there. Reminding us of the great compassion of our God is the Haftarah portion for tonight, which I'm not going to take the time to read, but I'm only going to share with you one section of it with which you will be familiar. It says, can the woman forget the child at her breast and not show pity on the infant from her womb? Even if these were to forget, still I would not forget you, for I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. That's the kind of compassion that he reaches out to us with and expects us to respond similarly in following him. As if to put an exclamation point to all this, next week's parsha, which picks up in a few verses, next week's parsha provides reinforcement and encouragement. You may recollect or recall the scene. I hope you recollect it and not recall it. Some of you just don't look that old. The tribe stood at Mount Gerizim, and they recited the blessings for Israel whenever they follow God. Conversely, the curses which would befall the people were recited by those who stood on Mount Ebal. You know, down through the years I have wondered why the curses from one and the blessings from the other. Why not the reverse? I got it. There's a hidden meaning in the names of the mountains. Is there? This is a commercial and a guilt trip. For you to understand the meaning that's here behind the text, you need to have taken, or you need to take, historical geography of the Bible. So now that I've set the stage, let's go back to these mountains. As back then, so even today, Mount Gerizim is still the one with blessings, is still green with trees and underbrush, whereas Mount Ebal remains brown and dusty. It's symbolic, even in our day and age, of the picture, the message of this action. And so the Parsha underscores, and the mountains reinforce once again, how important it is for God's people to listen to his instructions and then to go about doing them. And thereby, we get to enjoy all that he has in store for us. And the reward, as we've come to understand it, will be great. So what's it to be? Our heels or our hearts? Your choice, not only tonight, but as you go through your walk in life. So begin that choice or reinforce that choice in quiet for the next minute or so. Throughout the service, there's been a sense of anticipation as the Elated reminds us, and as we increase that anticipation, for the time of the kingdom of David's greater son. It's the time when the world will be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty. As we anticipate that day, we have a calling, we have a task, and that is to begin the perfecting of just such a place in the world. How do we do that? We give him our hearts rather than our heels. So do that as we now respond with the words of the Elena, pages 102 to 107. We rise and once again face Jerusalem.
עלינו לשבח אדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עצרנו כל גיי הרצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שמת כוחנו כהם, וגורלנו כפעמונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוצר הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו וגם מרונים, הוא אלוהינו אל בית מלכנו, את פסולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום, והשתה אותה, אל בית כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת עינו. Together. It is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world, for he has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs, our calling is our test. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him, for he stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth. Truly there is none like our Lord and King. As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath there is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's greater Son be established forever. For then the words be fulfilled, the Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz vayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shmo echad.
You may be seated. Once again, I see that the usual suspects have absented themselves. That has nothing to do with the drink by the same name. Yeah. It's only going to get worse. Because you got me. All right.